Hello, hello, hello. Yes, okay.
Okay, Rebecca, your job is to. That's pretty good.
Turn a little bit more.
Yeah. So, because we're going to have team members standing here, I think it's really nice to be able to switch between this view
Yeah.
and this view, and then Rebecca will zoom in onto their faces for the real close-ups. So basically, we've got the wide close-up and then the presentation. So the time is 10 minutes late, but it's okay. No,
At least it's late and it's not our fault.
yes, exactly. Yeah, we were just sitting there waiting.
They don't know.
Oh, by the way, we're live streaming my voice, so probably what I can do is just
Hi, everybody. Welcome back. And welcome to other friends who are joining us today's afternoon session. I invite you to take a seat. So for those who didn't join us, if you don't mind, the kind of new guests and new friends coming this afternoon, I'm going to do a very short introduction. And I just want to share a little bit about our Design Trust initiative. This special initiative this year for Future Studio, which is run by our nonprofit organization, is a new pilot program to explore and experiment questions that are, I would say, quite urgent for our city. And reflect on how our individual participation can actually build upon a larger kind of collective transformation for our city. This morning, we heard a lot about the definition of smallness. And I want to say that it was a very vibrant discussion, both conceptually, philosophically, and also physically as manifestations in some of the ideas of the participants this morning. But I also want to mention smallness itself, again, can be powerful when instigating change. There's a particular philosopher who said, likens this smallness, largeness reminds him of elephants and individual entrepreneurs as fleas. The elephant may have the resources and the scale, but fleas have the agility and freedom to take risks. A flea is more likely to create something in line with individual values rather than the elephant that needs to comply with other demands. And I thought this kind of quote and statement lends itself to this question of our role in our community, our role as designers or even government policymakers, and how can we enact to both be fleeters, but at least still remain grounded and pragmatic. I think there was some of these discussions this morning. So by doing this, what Design Trust is enabling would be discussions and conversations. Sorry, I don't know what's going on here. Is that working? To bring different communities together, both in public and private sectors, and also across borders. And this gave birth to Design Trust Future Studio's mission, is also in the disguise of wanting to empower a very young generation of designers who are 10 years out of school to have a role to play collectively, to think, to step away from their daily professions and work, but also have the opportunity to exchange with critical thinkers and also experts from the field. And so that's sort of the mission of our Design Trust Future Studio, both pedagogically and also working with ways of highlighting the value of the process of design. So very quickly, just to run through, to give you an idea of where we are today, Design Trust Future Studio is a long-term flagship program supported by Design Trust and also thankfully to Create Hong Kong for some funding, so thank you to them. And we also have been exploring various strategies since March with this group on what the question of smallness is in relationship to the phenomenon of micro-housing in Hong Kong, which we know could be a given. Is this the future? And how do we empower both the public and the private spaces together to produce a new strategy of the future of a micro-park in Hong Kong? Again, I mentioned something about exchange. Mentorship today is always seen as this kind of overpowering process or learning in academia. It's quite structured. Also, when we work in offices this morning, we heard from a team that we're very career goal focused. How can we take the time to have the ability to experiment and produce new collaborative structures? So we're very lucky to have a group of wonderful designer mentors to join us this year. Stanley Wong, who's sitting here in the front row, I would say, a veteran in the design community who, to be honest, still inspires me, because 30% of his time is dedicated to volunteering and education. So that's really incredible to have you lead one of the teams. We have Gary Chang here, also sitting up front, who was been instrumental in inspiring the group by visiting his domestic transformer home, 32 square meters of apartment where he's been insistent on living there still today. How old are you? For 40 years, transforming that as a case study of living. And we had a recent discussion that is 32 square meters too big? And he said he wants to, cut it up in half and rent it out to someone else. Is that possible? So is this the future we're facing in terms of micro-housing? In terms of extending the mentorship role, what we've done this year is invited international expertise, experts and designers and architects. We have Elizabeth Diller, who's instrumental in, I would say, finding agency in architecture, producing the High Line from a bottom-up strategy in New York, transforming the city in various ways. We have Mimi Huang, also an architect based in New York, who's been leading one of the teams and very interested in the agency of architecture with prototypes that have to take on immediate impact. And she's also working on micro units. And I mentioned this morning, Bloomberg was saying the micro units in Hong Kong are only 2/5 of what micro units are in New York. So there's already something interesting about the debate on scale and comparativeness. And finally, we have Sam Jacob, who's this incredible designer, exhibition designer from London. He's leading the team from the outside, but was here recently focusing on roles of sketching and analysis to produce different ways of thinking. And this is a collective effort. From this morning, I could already see we have some developers to the CEO of West Kowloon coming on board saying, I want to help. So I'm really pleased to hear that. We had Ada Wong recently run a workshop with our group in partnership with Good Labbers, Social Labbers. We have Ricky Yu, who's running Lightbee Housing, involved in doing a case study. Francis and I from Social Ventures. And of course, today I will introduce Carlos and Ava more formally. And this is our core group, 12 designers that have been nominated through a process of judging and vetting. And they are a cross-section of disciplines from architects, landscape designers, a writer, to our friends from urban designers, and also a technologist, I would say. So this is a nice group of mix from Hong Kong and Shenzhen design community coming together. Today, after today's discussions, the groups will be producing their final prototype for an exhibition in October. It's very process-driven and very organic. So today, your comments and encouragement will empower them to do even better in their projects. And again, our wonderful designer mentees are working full-time in their own practices. So they're also volunteering and supporting this effort into making transformation to our city. So just very quickly, visits to Gary Chang's home, going through walks in the city with Stanley Wong, looking at different public parks in Hong Kong, Skyping with Liz Diller, workshops like Venue, partner spring workshop here. Thank you very much again. And also Common Room hosted us in Sham Shui Po for a drawing workshop focusing on smallness, and the group actually had to study a small hardware store in Hong Kong and study its issue of compactness. So this is our group, and I'm so pleased to say the teams have just been formed for about a month and a half, and some radical ideas already, some very pragmatic ones, and also a very exciting process. And thank you again for Design Trust. I'm going to call out for my wonderful board members here, Alan and Jahan and Desiree and Jay and Joyce, who have been on this journey with me, along with our event collaborator, which I will introduce, Spring Workshop, and our partnerships with TÜV. Today we have guest critics here. A few already came this morning, gave very incisive responses. I won't go through this again, but this is our guest critics. We'll invite them to respond, and also our friends from the community. And I want to take this opportunity to introduce you our wonderful partner today, which is the Storefront for Art and Architecture. And Carlos is Associate Curator running this alongside with us today and bringing Storefront Hong Kong, Storefront International Series Hong Kong. So welcome everyone, and I really look forward to all your exchanges. Thank you.
Okay, welcome everybody to the afternoon season. Some of you have already heard us saying similar things this morning, but it's always good to remind everybody who we are and what are we doing. Welcome to Storefront International Series Hong Kong. My name, as Marisa was saying, it's Carlos Mínguez Carrasco. I'm the Associate Curator at the Storefront for Art and Architecture. For those who don't know what the Storefront is, we are a non-profit organization that is based in New York. We have a very recognizable facade designed by Stephen Hall and Vito Acconci. The organization was founded 35 years ago, and we have the mission of the institution is to basically advance radical and critical ideas for the advancement of discussions of cities, territories, and public life as a whole, always working with the connection and the work and the spaces between the fields of art and architecture. We develop many different programmings during the year. We do exhibitions, we do publications, almost an event every week or every 2 weeks during the whole year. We do installations like this. For example, this is by Soil, last year. We do, as I was saying, events, competitions, and projects. We were, for example, also the curators of the US Pavilion in at the Venice Biennale in 2014. But we are here today because we are organizing in partnership with Design Trust Storefront International Series Hong Kong. Storefront International Series is an initiative of a Storefront that started in 2013, when we went to Dominican Republic, and the idea of the project is to use some of the formats, the experimental formats that we develop in the events that we do at the gallery in New York, and we translate them to a specific city in order to discuss and understand certain issues or certain topics that are relevant for the city and are important to be discussed. The discussions are always connected to a local institution, always bringing international critics, but also local experts. And always the conversations, and that's one of the important components of the international series, is that the discussions happen at the spot in which the issues are being confronted, right? So we also went to Lisbon. So you see that the different events are happening in public spaces, in the middle of the square in Lisbon, for example. And that's the same thing that we are doing here, right? We have been in a ferry yesterday discussing questions of how border conditions affect the region. We have been discussing questions of sharing while we were cooking and we were drinking yesterday night around a paella. Today we're going to be focusing on questions of scale and smallness, and tomorrow we're going to have a walking series that we're going to cross the city through a series of tours that guided by experts of the city, and we're going to have a cabaret in which participants are going to be performing about excess, the idea of excess in the city. So today, this fourth event of the series of 3 days that we have as Storefront International Series Hong Kong is going to be about scale. And the format of this afternoon is going to be Manifesto Series. The Manifesto Series basically has the idea of asking participants, in this case the 4 teams that are going to be presenting, to have a manifesto. What is a manifesto, right? Tristan Tzara very famously say that to have a manifesto, what you have to do is to shoot to 3 things, to 1, 2, 3, and to aim for another 3 things, A, B, C, right? So a manifesto is always against something and for something. So the idea of today is that we're going to receive and we're going to hear the different teams presenting their manifestos in relation to the projects that they have been working with, and all of us, hopefully after that, we can have a discussion about it. So thank you very much for being here. I invite you to start with the manifestos.
Hi, so great. We will invite our first team for their manifesto in relationship to scale and your micropark. So Gary Chang's team, along with Zoe Chan, Hong Kong, Dick Wai Lai, and Jose Fu from Shenzhen. If you want to just maybe just very quickly introduce yourself again, I thought that was very useful. Your background very shortly, and then your manifesto. Thank you.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Zoe, born and grew in Hong Kong, and I graduated from Master in Architecture, University of Hong Kong, and Jose is a VR expert from Shenzhen, and we are also having a group mate, Dick Wai, and he is very good at presenting. It's unfortunate that he can't make it today, so I hope we can do our best. And so thank you, Gary, for leading us. So this morning, we have presented our micro part. In terms of smallness, we have identified smallness this morning. So to recall a bit the background, we have identified smallness as something that's maybe insignificant, but you see it every day, and you seldom question about it. So to be specific, in our case, it's real links in Hong Kong. So if you look around, or when you come up, you can see real links are everywhere. Sometimes it's on top of the building barriers. Sometimes it's for the demarcation used, for example, between different government departments. Sometimes it's for safety issues, for different purpose. So in relating to scale, so real links in terms of scale can be from zero, nothing, like an invisible barrier, to an area, to a district that enclosing the whole room, enclosing the whole circulation route, enclosing the whole district. So this is just captured downstairs. You can see we have a lot of different types, maybe demarcating different regions that, yes. So scale can be related to thickness. A real link can be zero thickness. It doesn't take up area on the floor. It only takes up a 2D vertical surface, maybe. It can also be, for example, in the first case, it's just a boundary of demarcation between a public park and a public road. It's actually, this is only for management and authorities only. So in this way, this is taken in just last week. So you can see the different use of real links in response to scale. And these are the planters that we mentioned this morning. So we think this is, we can be utilized in different ways. And these are the different layers of real links that happen in Hong Kong, which have a lot of potentials that can do it better. In relation to this morning's smallness, I think the bigness in our vision or our project is if everyone, if the citizen can adopt or own or occupy and share a real link in the city, that would be great. So because it may build a different cityscape. So, and you contribute to the build-up of the city. So in Hong Kong, you may not own a flag, but if you can own a real link, then what can you do with it? That's the third session we will discuss about it. So it's also about the thickness and layers of real links. And scale, we also feel it as expansion and contraction. And these are some interlocking systems. You can expand it into continuity, infinity. You can enclose it in every shape. So if we occupy or own a real link, you can occupy one, or you can gather with your friends or family, then it can become something else. So it's like demarcating. And scale in terms of time, this is a before and after photo in Shek Kip Mei. You can see the real link is timeless. It didn't change in 30 years. there's also different types of railings that grow with time. You can see the plants. And this is in Causeway Bay. So the before and after. You can also see the Victoria Park here. So in before, there's no, the trees are so small. Now it becomes another layer of barrier fence. So this is also the before and after photos. So we are also talking about a top-down vs a bottom-up approach in regarding of these railings and micro park. These are some typical harborfront scenarios in Hong Kong. There's an issue regarding the Sai Wan harborfront, that whether you put up a railing or not. This is another facilities that provided sometime, I think one year ago or a few months ago in Tai Po, that they are doing install a fish hook installations at the railings that intentionally to be used by for example, the families or the citizens to enjoy the harborfront and also the fishing. So this is another criteria when we really want to occupy the railings and shape our own or transform our own railings. There's some legislation issues. And these are some standards of typical Hong Kong railings. For example, from the buildings department for safety, for barrier-free, and those are for ventilation use, and because and the glass barrier is for so they combine a working platform and balconies together. So, talking about the railings, we wish to occupy, like if one day in a particular area, maybe, if everyone take up a railing, then you can build your own city, maybe. So this is just an example. What if you do with one railing? Like if you have one, then what will you do with it? Will you make it into a, there are many examples that maybe we discuss in section 3. So, thank you. Sorry, my teammates have something to supplement.
Here's the summary. We find that the current approach usually from the top to bottom may not penetrate the micro space. So that's why we are here. Our perspective is from the bottom to the top. Let's say the government should work with grassroots and the citizen and the designers and improve the micro space together. So we believe that the localization of our future is personalized, and the creation of individuals may against the globalization in the future. So, and we must do something. We must create something to stimulate everyone's association and its creativity. Thank you.
I think there was an interesting comment this morning, I think from Cole, who actually was thinking the possibility of how craft can play a role for design and architecture in shaping, and what is the question of micro-interventions. I think that's something still prevalent. The next team to present their manifestos in relationship to the micropark is led by Mimi Huang, who's based in New York. Stephen Ip is the lone representation today, along with Fion Zhang and Cesar Harada from their team. So, thanks.
Hi everyone, I'm Stephen, and I'm an architect. Have been working in a big practice for a while, which doing inhuman scale jobs. So thank you for inviting me to participate in this design studio, which I think is a refreshing process for me as well. So in this morning, we have talked about smallness, and now we talk about scale in a manifesto way. So what is scale? Scale to me is a very objective word. It is a language that is to set us the mind of focus, I would put it. It's like a ruler. So the word scale itself, it's quite hard to get. But if we put into different level of scales, then we start to look at different level of things. Like in the very small micro scale stuff, like a small organism or just a leaf, just a grass, or human scale stuff, we interact with people. We look at things that happen around us. And if we go to a bigger scale, if we talk about street scale, we always discuss what makes a street interesting. It is the sum of the elements that happens on the street, the activities, the shops, the second and third layer that behind and contribute to the atmosphere of the street. And to an even bigger scale, in city scale, how does our city work? How the system of transportation, the utilities, and the connection between different nodes of the city construct our perception of the city scale. So we always say that we are very proud of Hong Kong as a very vibrant place, a lot of activities happening, and we like the density of it. And at the same time, we can get into a park very easily. And so we always give Hong Kong such an image, such a definition. But if we look closer, what kind of city vibrancy or what kind of scale, city scale, street scale that we actually like in Hong Kong? So do we like a winding road like the Hollywood Road, that the level changes and there are a lot of small shops on the street, F&B outlets, a lot of galleries happenings, small street, slower street? Or do we like the scale of our new towns like Tseung Kwan O? You can see podiums connected to podiums and big shopping malls. All the people are inside the building, and not many people walk on the street, and people are connected by elevators down into the MTR station. So when we say we like the scale of Hong Kong, what kind of Hong Kong are we looking at? So that's the picture of that podium on the right. So you can see there's nothing happens on the street. It's just a blank facade. So is our city going out of scale, going out of human scale? So I think scale matters a lot. And the scale of our perception to our city is a government-driven policy. So looking back into these two areas, I'm quite interested to look at maps. So this is the map of Hollywood Road at the center. And if you notice the scale at the bottom right, it is 50 meters long there. So I put in the same scale and look at Tseung Kwan O. So you can see the whole Soho, or the whole central to Sheung Wan area that we love, can actually be replaced by two big podium malls. So I think this is quite stunning. And why is our city moving into this direction? I don't have the answer, and I hope if there are government officials here or urban planners, they can explain to me, is it possible to divide this up and create smaller street, smaller land, and recreate? Even in New Town, we can have this kind of central Soho atmosphere with a lot of vibrancy, a lot of activities happening inside the city. Is that possible in modern days? Or is it not possible in modern days? So just putting it together for your comparison, these two are in the same scale. So do we want a place like this with 1,000 different buildings, small buildings, or just two big plots controlled by the same developer, some guy, and then we all just live in a copy and paste apartment. So yes, that's my question. And my challenge to the scale of Hong Kong, can we revert to a human scale land policy? And these two are unbuilt projects. The left is the North Point Estate redevelopment, and the right is the Kwun Tong downtown redevelopment. So you can see we are still, as of 2017, we are still moving towards this direction. We amalgamate the site, create a big plot of land. So what's wrong with the original city fabric? Why cannot we keep the small streets and street activities? And from the government level, policy level, is it possible to renew our city in another way? Or if this top-down process is hard to change, can we go from bottom up? If we are able to have smaller land, can we have this kind of smaller buildings that allow smaller developers to do their own architecture, even individual investors? And could this help to proliferate smaller design firms and architectural firms in Hong Kong? Or if this top-down policy is not possible, can we use a human scale device to reconnect the human? So I hope the design of the micro park can be a vehicle to reconnecting human in a human scale, even in the new city or new town that the scale is so big. So this morning I've talked about the analogy of acupuncture, and I think we can also use this in explaining the scale. And can this small scale device have a bigger effect on a bigger scale urban planning situation? So I'm optimistic about it, because you can see worldwide there are a lot of examples that people want to use the street as a micro park. Like they just want to sit and chat. They just want to lie down on a grass and on a turf, or maybe you want to pop up farmers market, or you just want a place for a phone call or some play equipments, and all this can be installed in the proposed micropark system. So it's still things to explore, but I'm optimistic that this is a good inception point for using the micropark as the agency to reconnect the scale, the human scale in our city. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. I think we should just keep going with the 4 manifestos. Great. And our next group is Stanley Wong has been leading Samuel Wong, Vivian Ng, and Sylvia Chan. Just maybe briefly introduce yourself again.
Thank you, Marisa. Hi, I'm Samuel Wong, graduated from Master of Architecture, CUHK, and currently practicing at Rockwell Design Architect.
Hi, I'm Vivian, and I am just graduate from PolyU, studying product design, and I'm practicing local firm now.
Hi, I'm Sylvia Chan. I'm studying my PhD in architectural histories and theories at HKU, and I'm also a design writer. So here would love to present our manifesto about micropark in relation to scale. So what are microparks or microparks in Hong Kong? And are there specific definitions of microparks or parks actually in Hong Kong? So we were looking at material from the planning department, and we realized that the planning department in Hong Kong does not give park a definition. Instead, they see park as an example of passive open space, and you can see the definition here. So this kind of reflects that park is not necessarily an important type in planning in Hong Kong. And we also have a few observations about parks in Hong Kong. So there is almost always a fixed boundary. And there are a lot of rules, a lot of things that you can do in our parks. And then there are a lot of green areas, a lot of plants. And then there are all sorts of park furniture that kind of defines the activities in the parks. Sorry. So we would love to bring park a new definition. And we started by thinking about what kind of users would we like to serve. So we thought about having a mobile park that would go with food trucks. We thought about a park for a park at the Saiwan Instagram Pier for the young people. We also thought about just a park for everyone, people of different ages in our city. But then this morning we were talking about how smallness could actually change our perception of significance. And then we realized that by only addressing the needs of the users, we don't really change how people perceive the world or their core values. So we have the ambition to bring bigger changes through changing people's mindsets, to make people actually realize the importance of living for now. And we see changing people's mindset as a large-scale project.
Actually, after we do some research on what parks are to us nowadays, and we rethink about it, is it a park really need to have so many artificial green space to provide, or is a park need to be a functional-based space for some specific activities? But what we think we can do in this project about micro park in the future should have more possibilities. So we focus on how we define smallness in this morning is like we need to see things, see the insignificant things happen around us. And what we aim to provide in our micro park is a space for people to rethink and rethought about their lives. And actually, we think a park should include the environment around us. Actually, the environment around us every day is already designed there. And actually, we should put some time to develop it or discover the things around it. Actually, in Hong Kong, it's a very busy space. Every people is focusing on their work, and they also always complain that they don't have enough space to use. But if they can really put some time to enjoy the environment around them or observe the people and the things around them, is actually really treasured for them. And we proposed the concept of a space that for people to stop there and get some inspiration after experience our micro park. And here comes to the design details. Actually, our design will include 4 main parts. The first one is the pavilion, because we believe that simply a pavilion is the area for people to take a rest. And actually, this design is not separate the people from the area around them. Actually, nowadays, the design of parks is have so many boundaries or greener space to build that let you feel you are getting into another space. But actually, simply pavilion can let you feel you are emerged with the area around you. And when you get into it, it will have some furniture, because a park is somewhere to let you have take a rest and also gather with people. And there will be a display on the table. Actually, is showing the vision of the 360 zoom camera on the top of the pavilion. Because through this camera, we hope the participants can observe everything around them and zoom in every details they forgot or they cannot observe when they have their busy lives, just go to work and then have their lunch. And also there will have a preset image that question them about their lifestyles, and then motivate them to use the camera to observe. And this sitemap shows the starting point of our idea. Is actually one of the busiest districts in Hong Kong. Is Central, because people go to work there and they just walk very fast every day. And even when they have their lunchtime, they just walk past by and ignore the people around them. And other main concept of our idea is like a pop-up pavilion. It just like pinned into every busy district in Hong Kong, because we think by having this kind of micro park, people can really inspire after they experience them. So actually through this kind of smallness, we hope to change people's mind and engage Hong Kong people with hectic lifestyle into our concept. And it's really, we hope to build a network. So you can see this design is like, it can be dismantled and then built in different areas. And Sam will talk about the flow of the.
So our pavilion will actually take form of a Chinese pavilion, which is an important typology in Chinese architectures. And that's to say where millions miles of views and landscape all contained within the Chinese pavilion. So addressing the question of scales, a Chinese pavilion is actually you're trying to contract space and time within the pavilion. And the pavilion is not only a place for viewing, but also a place for resting and meeting people. And our strategy actually asks people, the busy people in Central, to have lunch, taking their lunch and sit in our pavilion to enjoy their lunch. And then once they enter into the pavilion, a set of, they can open the lunchbox, of course. And on top of the table surface, there's a hidden televisions. And then the televisions will actually start to play a presets kind of images that ask you rhetorical questions, that questions about the cities that you pass by every single day, but you never actually sees the details. And then the pavilion will ask you to actually to use the screen and the device to explore. Oh, sorry. Sorry. Next. Okay. And then you can actually use the camera on top of the pavilion to explore around the cities. So this is cityscape we see every single day. And then when you actually start using the camera to zoom into the city, you will actually start to discover details that you don't normally discover. For example, here you can see a signboard in which you pass by every day, but you never actually realize the front is actually quite interesting, that it's not one that you will see every day. And when you actually start zooming in and explore the city, you will find like plants that gradually grows on the elevations of the cities. And our micro park is not only a place where people can, it's not only a small place where people can rest, but it's also allows to slow down and willing to stop and kind of think about rediscovering the cities that we are already in. And and it's more like a manifesto of living in the moment with Joy Dong Ha. Thank you.
Thank you, Samuel. So living in the moment. I think the last manifesto presentation will be Sam Jacob's team, Wendy, Ricky, and Xavier.
Okay, I'm Wendy. I'm a urban designer and a researcher working in Shenzhen in Urbana's architecture office there, and I'm a head of the research department of that office and assistant curator of this year's Shenzhen Hong Kong Biennale.
Hi, I'm Xavier. I'm product designer. I'm also a candle and fragrance artisan. I'm also founder of a brand Be Candle and Moon Laboratory. And we have also another teammate, Ricky Lai, who's now based in London, who's a new multimedia designer and creator, also a musician. So Wendy will be doing.
Okay, thanks. We only have 5 slides, very small presentation, but the issue we are going to talk about, I think, is another scale. So starting from the history of park, we want to talk about the park issue in the scale of the history through decades. So through the time, the park in the beginning is just an object to show the wealth and the status of the owner, which is owned by the royal families as hunting ground, the deer gardens. Then to 16th century onwards, it become similar to the deer parks. It's also an object to show the property of a certain class of people. Then to 18th century, the park has been included in some gathering space of human settlements, becomes a public infrastructure. Then to now, the park has been serving as a public space where people can relax and get access to the nature. Then for this studio, we talk about the future of park. So the issue we are putting in front of us is actually to think about it's not about one park. It's about the definition and the whole system of the park. And the second point, I want to talk about the land, the land ownership of the park. It's not simply about how this micro park looks, how we design it. It's more about how we start to operate this design or this strategy. So instead of putting the park on a piece of land, the park owns its land, we are putting the park without the land. The park doesn't necessarily need to occupy a land in the city, but we are claiming that the public infrastructure can be positioned in a way which it doesn't occupy so much resource in the city. And also the mentality of we always go to a park compared to in nowadays using new technologies. We may think out of the box. We don't go to a park.
but then the park come to us. Another scale is about time and the size of these objects. For the time, when we go to a park in the past, we usually need to arrange a trip. Then we bring our family, go to a park to do an excursion. But now the park they come to us, so it exists at almost any time, and it can be any size. Then we have talked about the resource of a city, of how the city manage the resource of its own. Instead of the government put so much energy into the management and putting all the regulation in order to prevent people from doing something bad. Well, as Ada was mentioning about the park in the morning, there is much more behind the appearance of existing parks. So it takes a lot of resources. We are wondering if there is another way of managing all this resource, urban resource, public resource. So by changing the system into using the tool of the shared economy, this tool can empower us to think how we can create another a system of utilizing the public resource and build something. It's like creating a social welfare through the power of the market economy, not by the government. So also, Xavier, want to add something?
And this morning we've talked about virus. A virus is something which is really small, you cannot say it, but it's changing, is evolving organically. It can parasite in your bodies and everything, become something very big, a disease that kill a lot of people. So I think with utilizing the technology and the shared economy principles, park can be, it is small modules, but it can grow into a very organic way. So this is our concept of the park and scale. Thank you.
I mean, maybe what we can do is like a similar thing that we did this morning. That it's like, I will ask each of you of standing up, getting your chair, and instead of doing a circle as we did this morning, what we are going to do is we are going to be focused a little bit more on the designs that are hanging on the walls. So let's go maybe facing this area first, for example. So let's do a semi-circle facing this wall. And let's start the conversation. And please, like, be close to the, like, let's get as close as possible to the wall, because otherwise we are going to be too disseminated. So please, a little bit closer. Yeah. One more. At least 1 or 2 lines more closer to the wall, so we can be all together discussing and opening the mic to everybody. Okay, so let's start to discuss scale and to discuss the different projects. Scale is a very difficult topic, I have to say. I think that this morning the idea of smallness was a little bit more tangible, I would say. It was like a little bit more clearly defined by size. But the scale is a little bit more abstract, right? It connects to the distinction between two elements. And I thought that were like interesting moments in the presentations in which the idea of a scale was challenged. For example, I was very like interested in when in this, for example, in this project, the idea of certain railings when they were like out of a scale, suddenly a railing that usually has this size suddenly was like scaled up almost to be the size of a person, suddenly produce a completely different relationship to the space, right? So the idea of playing with scale as a tool for the redefinition of a space, I thought that was an interesting approach to certain of the topics that we were discussing today. And there was also like a second like topic that for me was interesting. I don't know in which of the projects is, and maybe we can go later, but was the idea of the zoom, right? Like that camera that was on top of the pavilion and was zooming in to the city, right? So it was like the idea of a scale here was a form of looking closer to certain things. So maybe as a way to start the conversation in relation to the projects, we can think about those moments in which the idea of a scale was used kind of differently, in a kind of a disruptive way instead of a more conventional way of understanding the scale in architecture. So I'm gonna start moving the mic around, and maybe we can start having some responses about the projects and about the idea of a scale as a whole. That was.
No, just because the group we're sitting in front of, maybe it would be a good point. And I think Gary has.
Is on your observations, and I think this is definitely your starting point of try to observing and pick up what is to me is important things was already there. Maybe actually in today among the four groups there's a common you could say theme of passively adopting or accepting the conditions of Hong Kong, which is like you really cannot do anything. It takes a long time to get approved to do something meaningful. So instead of doing this, you try to get something which is already there and try to transform it to something useful and meaningful. And hopefully at the end it's easy, like pop-up things. So maybe this is the kind of mentality. I think not just our group, but also quite a common theme among all the four groups that you observe things which is already there and try to reinvent. And then, but in terms of scale, what's interesting, the team members are talking about the railings is already there, and it says that almost actually the funny thing is in Hong Kong is it won't disappear, of course. It will get more and more, bigger and bigger. So we have a lot. Actually, if we consider railing a kind of urban organic species, they will only expand and grow dramatically. So you have a lot of ingredients to play around with. You will never vanish. The way is, and actually also the important thing is about railing is so many things are happening already, tapping onto the railings by different people. So in that sense, maybe this is something very adaptive and easy to adopt. Yeah.
I mean, my question for the group would be in terms of starting from the scale of a railing and the imprint of the human quality and touch. Because what I find fascinating is the potential of this as a strategy, as a structure, but then if you are coming in as a designer to empower the public, do you want the public to really have ownership to design, or do you see the design profession as the architects and the team? And this is a question for you guys. How do you inject that value of detailing to this? Because if you're under Gary's tutelage and obsessing about joint details to transformability, how can you apply these notions of technique and tactics in a public space? I'm just curious for the next step as a way to challenge how scalable this is as a object, as a detail into a massive transformation to the city. Is that possible?
Well, thank you. It's a good question. My last project about the application is about the Windmill Angel. So now this idea come to us. It's very similar to in some point of it's very similar to my last project of application. So it's sorry.
In regarding of the Hong Kong contest or the site contest, first step, because in the next section we are going to share that maybe we are going to make apps first to adapt to let people to know where the railing is and how to get in touch with it, or if you have a chance, how would you transform it? Because not every railing in Hong Kong is suitable, maybe. And the next answer is, like everyone is a designer actually, and what are we empowering people, or what is the potential is that we identify the smallness, or we identify the elements that can make a big impact to the city, and then the professionals or other parties work together to make it possible. So this is my wish.
I thought that there were like two points for me that were interesting, and maybe we can follow up with that. One was the moment in which I was talking about, right? Like the scale of an element that suddenly scales up, but also the moment of the fishing, right? Because actually suddenly a very, very small operation in the railing constructs a certain performativity of the railing, right? Like constructs a certain action that is gonna be connected to it. And I was actually thinking that was going to be the direction of the project, right? Like, okay, I was imagining already like different kind of entries into the railing in order to produce certain actions that can produce like all the elements that you would imagine that a park or like the idea of a park is, right? So I actually think that kind of direction is an interesting one, and to add like a specific qualities, that scale that Cole was mentioning, that craftness of the railing as a potential follow-up for the different activities, no?
I mean, that's the potential contribution that you as designers have to make, right? You can turn this over to the public, of course, but just as you are now being mentored by Gary, you have the potential to mentor the public through your own project by engaging with the precision, again, the craft of design, right? That's the skill that you potentially bring to the exercise.
Actually, some reminder maybe. Something interesting about this project is actually I keep on reminding our team member that, strange enough, this railing is quite a popular topic in the last couple of years. I think we are not the first one to pick out this idea. Actually, there's already quite some interesting people doing interesting phenomenon observations about the railing. One very recent one, very interesting, is actually a project which asks the elderly people to think about how to do the railing, and then there's a group of designers help them to realize it. So it's already there. I think another fun part about this is something already there and pretty rigid. The railing is quite rigid. That's why by doing something simple attachment, then you can totally transform the function of railing to something else. And that's also something interesting about Hong Kong. To begin with, always they don't have any idea what to do with it, just simply as a boundary to avoid people getting into the water and so on and so forth. But then it turned out to be something else easily. The other example actually keep on saying is the mid-level escalator. Original idea is to save the traffic problem, but then it totally changed the entire area from something quite difficult to access to into something very vibrant. So there's something specific about Hong Kong. It always begins with a boring incentive, but turn out to be something interesting by self-adaptive means by the people. So the railing is a very good example. So that's why I highly recommend the group, maybe everyone also, to try to have a big picture, like a system approach, instead of focusing on individual little interests. I think the system approach could be really meaningful.
Just quickly, I have a question for the people put the brief together. Smallness is a subject matter, but micro parks is the eventual connection, right? And I think after listening to the two parts of presentation, I'm very, very excited in general at what is being proposed by each one. Of course, I'm very skeptical about certain things like, who is in ownership, who's the owner, what is the purpose of having a green space in the middle of the road, who's going to order this, who's going to operate, who's going to take care of it. But actually, now this question of craftsmanship really brings it back to the role of the designer as a kind of an optimistic author of where we ideally want our future cities to be, specifically Hong Kong, and how this designer can get the community together to create a chalkboard for the community to help author the finished product in a very organic way. And I don't know what kind of product or will be produced at the end of the session, which will be very exciting to see in October. But are they going to stay separate 4 teams, or are they going to come together as one? I'm curious because everybody has a perspective, and it would be very interesting to see if they come together as one team, what that actually is.
This is a pilot program, and which is why I'm so excited with this kind of future studio process. It's very much about documenting the invisible processes of design. We often don't see, we're often so focused on the final object or the final outcome. This is how we operate. But the kind of birth of this program is to really allow that fluidity of conversation. So actually this morning, some of the teams were already like, well, I'm with one mentor. However, that other mentee designer has such similar possibilities. Can we start to collaborate and collude and confuse? And I'm like, absolutely, yes. Of course, there's a structure to this, I wouldn't say social engineering aspect of the team formation, but there has been this question of how do we work together. Okay, we had a very specific issue of forming them in groups. So there's 4 mentors, there's 3 mentees, cross-border, I would say cross continents. And then how do you actually have that as a challenge in terms of a conversation that's beyond just Hong Kong? So that's also extremely, extremely, extremely important. But in terms of like the merging or the confusions, we have one team, I believe, just because I'm sitting in front of this one, I think Stephen's challenge to the skips as a potential might eventually collaborate with the team across the way with Mobile Park. So yes, I think this is a valid way of thinking about collaboration and the collective notion. So I don't know. Again, it's also giving back the authorship to the group to empower them to also challenge this way of working and having the teams to kind of discuss and debate that process. So I'm very open-minded about this organic notion, which does not usually happen in the restrictive qualities of, I would say, in academia or even in the professional servicing of architecture. So it's free for all, but within a structure where we have the outcome is an exhibition in October, which is still, we're questioning what that exhibition is. And earlier, maybe I can move in over to Ethel, we had a question about public communication. How do you present these ideas beyond the room that we're talking to and the participants, and how do we engage the public in a larger discussion, which is where Storefront International Series empowers us to do a little bit more beyond our capacity. Do you want to share a bit?
Yeah, no, I think that, well, we were talking before about how this experience, I mean, can be a really good example of how to drive the conversation outside the walls of the simply theoretical analysis by, you know, academics sharing their same ideas and we all agree. And so I was telling Marisa that I really like the format of these 3 days events, because by being in the street, by being cooking together, discussing now these projects, it's a way to engage different levels of conversations. And one of the groups mentioned before that the scale is related with layers. So I think it's something that also in the conversation is so important to approach and to address. And going to a more focused, specific projects in the way of communication or engaging the public. I think, for example, this is a very good example, because I think this project relates the morning session, because we were talking about the smallness, and the pieces of the railings can be small pieces, but now in the afternoon we are talking about the scale, and to having a scale you need to have a unit of measurement to compare. So when you have different pieces of the railing and you start joining them together, we are talking about the smallness, scale at the same time, and by being something that only works with participation, I think we are driving again the talking, the inside talking and the studio talking to the public. So I think it can be a very good example of the things we were discussing before.
Yeah, but I think that actually that's very important, right? Like one of the issues that we are discussing here is, and it's connected to scale, is that, yeah, this is a project. We are now discussing it as a project. But I mean, the intention of, at least the intention of the Storefront International Series is to really produce action, right? Like really reflect on what is the capacity of a designer or an architect to really modify certain things, right? It's not theoretical. It's like what happens with the railings in the city and how can we do something about it, right? So for example, I feel that a crucial component of the project becomes the website, right? Becomes the app. No? They are saying, no, it's not an app, it's not a website, it's not an app. Okay, well, so what it is then?
Well, maybe, could I, because I have a question related and we can broaden it to all the groups, because actually all of the groups had a digital component, right?
Right.
The app that you could use to order the park, the digital camera that's going to allow you to zoom out into sections into the city. You guys have the app through which you can find these railings. So it's not a critique or a judgment by any means. I'm just curious to know why that seems to be such an essential part of the project. What does that digital realm give you? Is it just about public engagement and access, or is there something about it that feels, I don't know, easier, more accessible than the actual physical object?
Many of these pictures is found by me, and I want to share some feelings. And the most surprising to me is that ordinary railings can reflect the social problems, the problem of human nature. That's the key point. For example, the railing is used to protect pedestrian. Okay, but because of the behavior caused by the shortcut, so and many people don't follow the rules. Finally, they break they cross the handrail and the railing, and some old elderly people fail to get. Sorry. How about this?
I think what we are trying to say is we have the final product is not an app, but we have some specific target users that identified, and then the system will be based on the users, the needs, and the site context. So this is a system of prototypes of railings that gives a matrix of choices like a menu, but then the big picture is I wish one day then everyone can take the ownership, then they can do their own design. But of course, we are focusing on specific users, specific site, and specific design.
I think I would still like to focus on the specific condition of the project, of this particular element of the railing. Is so many things are already happened, but different kinds of people already. I think maybe instead of focusing on doing design in the traditional sense that you do design to the railing, maybe equally it's interesting to just collect what's already happened. Yeah, by different kinds of people. So many by the communication companies. they try to already occupy the railing for a long time, and so many people have done something. The banners and so on. So many interesting already there. So maybe it's good to have like maybe a website or web that try to archive, collect, and expand and grow what you people observe. And sometimes you may add some design or you do some quickly pop-up, occupy the railing for 1 hour. I think it's highly possible. If you do it after midnight or during specific time, nobody will stop you, maybe likely, because this has already gradually grown into quite a possible, less arguable, less controversial elements, because people, even the different authorities start to get used to this kind of use without proper approval. I don't mean we shouldn't get approval, but this many ways big and large scale. So I think the beauty of it maybe is to build up different happenings instead of purely on design in the most traditional sense. Yeah.
I think I'm glad that we are bringing the questions of scale into our discussions of smallness. What is the meaning of smallness? Because I think smallness and bigness, they are all relative. So if we do not have kind of the scale in our mind, it is meaningless. And scale, I think, is totally artificial. It's something that we create ourselves. I think in nature, there is no scale of bigness or smallness. It's something that human created to frame our questions. I think the discussion about the zoom camera is very relevant, because depending on how we zoom in and zoom out, we are looking at the problem at a certain scale. And because smallness and bigness, I don't think it's good or bad in their own. I mean, is, when we ask the question, then it become appropriate for us to say, hey, smallness is good or smallness is bad in this sense. And I think apart from the smallness, I think especially on the project on the railing, I would actually suggest to the team to look at nothingness as well. Smallness, when we reduce it to the absolutely smallness, it's zero, nothing. And railing, especially in Hong Kong, we see so many railing in unnecessary places. Maybe the question to ask is where we do not need railings, rather than designing a good railing. That's my suggestion. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I mean, I try to really clarify and define a little bit about what is going on here. I think it's a practice of social innovations. And social innovation always starts with a creative activism and eventually becoming a sustainable entrepreneurship. And the objective of social innovation is not about the process. It's not about the product. It's not about the apps, not about channels. It's about the impact. And I think the situation here to me is, it is, the smallness is actually a methodology for a very light touch hacking process to change a really big system. So that means there's a huge leverage of impact as general. So basically, like in terms of impact per dollar, I mean, as a concept, like why a developer have very little impact per dollar versus a creative artist creating an activism and creating huge amount of impact, but just spending maybe like zero amount of money. I mean, I think the value of social innovation is really about small and the leverage. And the problem right now, what I see is that I think there is a lack of the definition of the impact for the projects to generate. So for example, if the railing is defined as a process to generate an impact, that awareness of people start to understand demarcations is a problem in the city. So the measurements of the impact is how people understand everybody is segregated, right? Then we can actually go back and say, who are actually going to become the audience and participants of this program? Is that going to be the elderly people? Is that going to be the younger people? And then we can define what kind of channel that we can set up for disseminating the message and curating the activism. So if actually that's going to be like younger people, and they're actually equipped them with data literacy, like people use cell phones a lot, then maybe an app and website is better. But if we're talking about elderly people or housewives or new migrants, maybe like some conventional channels is better. So it really depends on who are the people that we generate and what kind of impact and how we measure that. Come back, we start to set up the methodologies and strategies about how to do that. So railing, I think, to me, is more about a starting point about like the entire chain of social innovation actually going to create it. And I think the interesting things to me about this is more about generating a massive movement instead of giving people a desire to execute. So at the end of the day, if we're actually talking to, like really young people, maybe it's just an app just for younger people to sharing pictures like that. If there is a million of that kind of really interesting application of that, that becoming an inspiration of people to copy and paste. Like, oh, I saw that guy doing that. Let me also sleep on the railway, right? So basically, I think that is like one way to actually create the collective movement of it. And I think at the end of the day, I think for that project, I think we really start to challenging the practicalities of that. I think social innovation always happening with a very big boundary. And that actually pushed the creativity to an extreme. Like, when Mercedes is making the smallest car, they don't call it small car, they call it smart car, right? So coming back to this case, I think it's really about like what is the smartness about these two ideas and how we can actually define the gray zones that we can start to hack in the first virus. So for example, like that one, maybe you're just putting a truck randomly on the street. The policeman will come in 10 minutes. But if you can just start to find out where is the parking lot for trucks, which is, you got 2 hours per day or per week, that you can always curate this kind of, pop-up 2-hour park. And then you just drive the car away, and then your cost is like 14 Hong Kong dollars per hour. And I think maybe that is like one way that you can start hacking that. And once people see the value of it, you can start to scale. You can start to become a policy. You can start to become a business. You can become something like something. But I think the key issue is that how can we really spend the shortest time to create the most smartest demo for people to see the value of it? I mean, I think that's the key right now, I think.
But yeah, building on that, I mean, for me, what happened, and I'm going to be a little bit critical here, but what happens with this project for me is that they have detected very clearly what is the potential, right? Like the railing as a space. Railing is a space that we need to occupy and we need to modify and we need to rethink in order to produce like some kind of change. But what I think it's still lacking is that what is that change that you're like trying to produce, right? And that's why I come back to the idea of the channel that you were mentioning, the idea of the app, that even though, of course, it's not your final goal, it's definitely the tool that you're using in order to talk to certain people. And I think that that is where you are lacking position, because you're actually detaching from the decision of what that rail is going to be in order to, well, I don't know, somebody will decide it. Like the public, quote-unquote public, will decide it. And I think that that is one of the most important components of how an architect operates today, to define what is your public and what are the positions that you are taking towards that public. Because if you produce, instead of an app, what you produce is a do-it-yourself newsprint that basically you distribute to the whole, a specific neighborhood in order to produce a certain modification in the railings that each of the civilians have in front of their houses, in order to modify that railing and construct a bench of that railing. Actually, that is, you are defining a public in a completely different way than an application, right? Right, it's like but I think that is one of the important questions that we have, and it's not only for this. It's basically for every single project. It is going to be burning in a second. But because that it's not secondary, right? Like the decision of what is the channel in which you are going to be addressing certain projects, that is not a secondary decision of the architect. It's almost primary, including the design. No? But I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah. I really agree what you just sum it up as your comment or your advice. And I think everyone sitting in front of your concept here, no one doubt there's a possibility, it's a good device, a good platform to start do something. In conjunction, what level you want to have a dialogue with the particular, you said, site-specific, targeted audience, different kind of a message or engagement. But I really want to know what's your next step before October. I really want to know, is there any plan? Start from that very promising device. Then what's next? Tell me.
We are going to develop an application, mobile application. Maybe our website in programmer. Programmer. I will find one. I will find someone. For coding, coding. Maybe our website, maybe app, mobile app.
How you calculate someone in some circle now? If the welding is there. How the site-specific management here?
Site-specific.
Say the welding downstairs, then tell me you're going to do something in downstairs that welding, then what's next?
Well, we will test we will promote based on the location and get some first adapters, and we will communicate with these first adapters, and we will collect the first data, and we will do a lot of tests and update our application.
You just a facilitator then?
Facilitate.
Informative facilitator. Then are you really engage the local citizen here?
Yeah.
That's what your role then? Tell me.
I think like what Gary said, 2 steps. One step is develop the apps that identify the existing rail links in Hong Kong that let people to access and identify which one they're going to hack. For example, ask all of you to download the apps and identify one, and then we go at night or whatever to charge to make something.
What's that something? That is very crucial. What's that something?
Because we are using the rail links as a tool to realize our micro park. So I think that elements are what your definition or my definition of micro park. For example, my park is like I like to enjoy the nature, or I want to have a shade. Then my rail link will be to create my own micro park and to share with everyone, and so everyone will do the same.
Is a branch or is a shape decided by who? Decided by you or decided by the neighborhood there?
It's a parallel process. No?
So what's that process? That's exactly what I mean. What's that process?
Okay, maybe we can start this thing from from some shopping mall, and we collaborate with the commercial, the commercial, and we make we make this project, and we work with the local shopping mall and start from this location. Yeah, make things more public welfare and commercial.
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe to kind of converge the conversation, because I think there's two things here. One is, I think the urgency of wanting to know, and we're here to help, right? So we're all collectively trying to identify the possibilities for each team, okay? So we're all mentors, we're all mentees. And I would say to empower it further, it's the kind of consolidation of what do you want to see at the end of this. So obviously October is a milestone of presenting the research, but also the potential of tools. So if this is a DIY manual to empower citizens to produce interventions along a sort of catalog of design strategies, is that one thing we're seeing from your group potentially? Or is it something what Gary is also alluding to? Is it going to be a digital site that could be documenting 2,000 to 3,000 ways of how citizens have already been intervening and questioning the role of micro possibilities from the citizen's perspective? But however, then, do you choose 3 case studies to enact your design and research physically as a case study? I think these are the kind of questions I think Stanley is trying to imagine what we would see, and how can we facilitate that? Would it be then our role to find the right app designer to help facilitate that discussion as a next step? Or would it be finding the right funding mechanisms? Or can we begin to interview the agencies of the highway departments and the building codes to really study that and see, is it only just one line item to change that can actually transform something else? So I think these are the questions we could still discuss throughout the different projects, but just food for thought. You'll get another 20 minutes to think about how you respond to your, but I would love to move this onward. Yeah. Sarah, no?
I think maybe not, because I might raise any more thing for them to, well, actually, I was thinking about, like, it is very good that they have done a lot of case studies. I really appreciate what you concluded. It's very good. I think at least if they go on one of this direction, I want to raise that is, you don't need, I mean, just my opinion, it might not be representing the organization's thoughts, but I think you might not need to jump into finding a conclusion so quickly. When you are starting with your research on the railing, I think the interesting part is you are trying to look into spatial possibilities, by using a piece of like linear element. It is just something that you can define it as a barricade. It could be with some authority, symbolic meaning. You can define it in, I mean, you can look into it in all different ways. It is good that you have put out some studies, but I would think that it would be good that if you put out more studies. I will be looking forward to that. For instance, you've put like some really nice photo with a police against this water barricade. I mean, in scale-wise, it's exciting. But I also see that you are mixing up two things. One is a temporary structure, a temporary barricade. The other thing is the thing we usually see very normal in Hong Kong is the permanent type of railings alongside of the road edge. So they are being there for different purpose. And because of that nature, I think there is a lot of interesting things to look into. This different type of railings and what does that mean. And it is, I always think that it's good to look into that in a more humorous way. Like, it will generate something interesting, I think. Yeah, but I do think, like, for instance, the temporary one, you can form space quickly. But for the permanent one, you cannot. But sometimes you find existing space which is demarcated by this permanent one, which is really absurd, really ridiculous. How do you respond to those situations? I think this is the thing we could also look into. I mean, sorry if I'm not generating more problems and questions.
Thank you, sir. I think that's really useful. Maybe Eric quickly, and then I want to give some room for each team to have discussion, because we were just only focusing on team one. So maybe Eric quickly, and then, or you can, go ahead.
Just very quickly, just hearing also some of the other thoughts, I have to echo the fact that I find the app rather distracting from the real issue, because I find that if I'm looking at my phone, I'm disengaging from everyone else, and you're cutting yourself off from humanity. And I feel like the railings in some ways do that as well. They cut humanity off from one another. So you're only reinforcing the idea of you getting cut off from everyone else. Even though it seems participatory by the way you describe it, I don't think it's participatory in reality. The next thing that I think that is rather engaging about your presentation is you have 1974, 2017. So what would be 2019? What's 2020? I think the idea that this is dissatisfactory because you're cutting off nature from people, this is dissatisfactory because you're cutting off nature from people. Is there something about the nature of a railing that combines with the idea of a park or a micro park that you can still engage the people? So if the railing becomes a criticism of this disengagement, what could you do to engage instead? And at what scales could that be possible? And I think there's different technologies or different things that could be imagined that go beyond even this example. I mean, I think this one's a really nice one, and maybe 2 or 3 examples of very different situations that you would even have found conditions that you then need to augment or change. And then you have a very clear vision of what to tackle. Because I think if you try to tackle everything, you might not tackle anything. And that would be my biggest fear. The other thing, just coming back to Stephen's presentation and his teams, just this idea that we've lost our sense of scale. I think it's a really critical observation, and how to regain it again with this project. So if the podium becomes the enemy in a way, which it seems like it's a very clearly defined enemy, which I like. I mean, I think to have any sort of strong ideas, you also need to define what your idea is against. And I think it has an incredibly strong idea of what it is against and what your position is. And it aligns so much with the studio. The idea of smallness, the idea of having impact, the idea that we probably have lost a sense of an individual within the city as well. That was what I took away from it, is that like the idea of Soho being built by hundreds or thousands of people slowly over time has been replaced by, you know, a corporation building in one go. And that has actually really radically changed how we engage and how we potentially engage in the city. So just this idea about how an individual could still have impact, or an individual could still have and make the change within the city, or in this case, Micro Park, I think could be quite powerful.
Great. Stephen, could you remind us, just to be on record, why and the loophole of your skip is actually in between, it's in a gray zone. It operates in gray zone. Can you just recap that? Because I think this morning we had a few potential sponsors and foundations who were completely in love with that idea and were willing to potentially fund and construct this strategy for you in October, November, December this year.
Yes, this morning we talked about smallness, and just now we talked about scale, but I didn't have the chance to talk about why exactly I selected the skips. It is because when I look into the city, just like the image of the street, there is a lot of elements in it, but we all often found the skips around us, and I look into the policies that govern the skips, and I found that there's no policy governing it. So there is no license plate on the skip, so the police can't issue a ticket. And as long as there's no immediate danger, they don't think it is their job to remove it. So there is a statistics at the middle right, and it shows that there are around 1,000 complaints every year that people call to the police or call to various departments. But yes, you can see the police only remove 5 skips in a year or 4 skips in another year. So basically there's no control. And somehow people accepted it as part of the city. And it is something that we can occupy a space almost like we can do it right away, right now. So
Okay.
I think the skip is a kind of a vehicle that we can use to start to challenge the ownership of the street.
Okay.
Yes.
Great. So can I, sorry, I know everyone wants to jump in, but we originally had a moment for a short coffee break. Carlos, my co-conspirator, would you like to continue? We move everyone to the other side of the room. No break? Okay. We go for 2 more teams, and then we have a really massive discussion. I think that would be wonderful. Is that okay for everyone? So let's pick up your chairs, and we'll look at the other side of the room. Thank you.
We are hacking the space with the chairs.
Sorry, Gary. You can talk later. I just want to give everyone a voice. Carlos.
And also, like maybe you also come a little bit closer. You do like as small as possible circle.
Same concept, kindergarten.
Exactly.
Circular top discussion.
I have a design question to team number 4. Oh, team number 3. I really appreciate the fact that you guys are thinking about the park other than a green grass, that it's actually quite programmatic. And one can say even contextual to local culture. I'm not talking about the style of the building per se, but the kind of the activity and the scale. But I wonder why, my question is to the designers, why do you need to veil the the structure, and you need an intermediary like a camera to appreciate your surroundings?
Yeah, come on.
Why can't you just look out?
I think the idea of pavilion comes from our study of it. It actually originated from the Chinese character. It's like stop. The Chinese character is the same as pavilion in Chinese. So I guess that was like where the architectural form actually originated from. As for the device, I think what we're trying to look at here, these are things that we feel we really rely on the device to look at because it requires infinite zoom. So like if my eyesight is not good, and I'll need it, yeah.
And only sometimes when you zoom into specific spot, really specific spots, you start to look closer, and then you will realize something that you never actually see. That's what happens to the images that are filmed? Or the ones real life? Well, I think is there's nothing happening, but it's something that happens to one's mind, where when they see the images, when they realize something, they actually start to questions about it's the sort of things that we want to have in people, and trying to make a big impact, larger impact in this, trying to allow them to think about the cities.
Yeah, and I guess the device itself is quite important in introducing a perspective that a human being don't necessarily see. I guess that's also one thing that we're thinking about.
Can I add something? I was more or less following you because I was thinking the same. I was in your first presentation in the morning when you were talking about the value of stop, relax, and now in the presentation in the afternoon, I was thinking how beautiful can be to create a space like a Faraday cage, for example, no connection, so you don't need a digital screen or something. You just look at the city because you don't have the possibility of receive any information in your mobile or whatever. And also to recover the human and social ingredient or component of the city, because the city is not only the buildings or the streets, it's who inhabits the city. So, and I think by looking in the screen, in the zoom in, zoom out, we can have a very detailed information, but we are missing the most important part of the urban environment, in my opinion. So, I don't know, it's just a...
Yeah, I think that definitely there is a contradiction in there, but I think like there is another reading of the project that it would be in the other direction, right? That is actually what you're constructing is a capsule that is an eye, right? It's a gigantic eye in which you enter, and basically the whole city becomes hyper real, right? And I think that your idea of media connected to the pavilion, I think that is the direction. But I completely agree with you. Suddenly, if that is the purpose, why the style? Like suddenly the design, you have almost surrender in the design of the pavilion, because basically it's following like certain kind of traditional directions that are not connected to what your purpose is. So I think that there are like different components of your project that are not aligned. The origin of the project is like to produce a space of like calmness, and you're constructing the opposite, and that opposite has a specific aesthetic that doesn't align with it. So I think that to clarify those 3 lines of thought and to align them would be something that it's helpful for the next steps, no?
I also have some problem with the camera. I think we talk about slowing down, relaxing in the city and so on. I think that's great. That is what really we need in a hustle city. And then you turn something into kind of a surveillance booth for the surrounding. What happens to the privacy of the passerby, the pedestrian around it? I mean, I wouldn't want to walk around that pavilion if I know there's a camera that could zoom in on all my activity.
There's also a privacy issue. I know for CCTV, they have special software that doesn't allow you to like zoom into people's windows to prevent the police from spying on people. So there, I mean, obviously something could be built in to this to prevent people from zooming in unfortunate places. But also the idea, yeah, that you're sort of disconnecting from the city. It seemed like your initial image of the boundaries, like all these fixed boundaries, again, have this idea of critiquing the idea of having multiple boundaries that prevent you from coming closer. And then any optical device also has that sense as well, that you're trying to reach close, but you're still far away. It reminds me also, in a strange way, just because you mentioned history and theory, reminds me of the Le Corbusier Paris apartment, where he builds these electronic hedges that basically close off Paris. So you're at a place in Paris where you have the best views, but you can't see out. And then there's a periscope that looks out into the city. So the only way to view the city is through the device itself. So it's like becomes this purposefully mediated experience where they close off the cities to view the city through the device. But that's very purposefully done. Like it was for someone who appreciates surrealism. So it was very purposefully like negating your presence in the city so you can sort of spy and look back into the city. So I wonder if your actions are purposeful or if your actions are somehow, you don't realize this cutting off, closing the curtain, looking into a zooming device, looking out. It seems weirdly purposeful, but also perhaps not. It's hard for me to judge. But if it is purposeful, then I wish to know what the purpose really is. Because what's the difference between taking a zoom lens, going out, photographing those details, putting them online? The fact that it's happening in real time, does that make it any more, does that bring you closer to the event any more than seeing an image that was photographed 20 years ago? I'm not certain. And what details you're actually trying to see. To see nature through this lens, I'm not sure if you're still feeling nature.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think what I like intensely about the potential of this, you're challenging yourself to give a moment of repose in the densest part of Hong Kong. I think I like that challenge already, just as simple as like your self-generated brief is how do you create a micro, I wouldn't say if it's a park or a moment. You keep saying the word, or use the word slowness, but what does that mean? So I don't know if we can bring it into like a more radical way where I also remember when we had that conversation with Liz Diller over Skype, she was challenging us to think about microparks as not only about physicalities, but maybe architectures of atmosphere, right? So how does your context of certain sites respond to either historic condition that could be actually radically incredible? It could be a learning device. I mean, I don't know, when I bring my children out to parks, they're so generic in Hong Kong, but is there something else that is also a mechanism to be inspired about nature? And do some of them dissolve where you actually use the kind of water parks and you create the perfect humidity to create a blurring effect around your quiet park and you can actually own that? It depends how radical you want to push this, but I agree, maybe it doesn't need to have that identity of a pavilion itself, but how do you take the strategy of all these incredible Chinese approaches of borrowing nature and inserting into the most dense fabric? That would be radically amazing, and to experience that. I don't know, again, is this a real project or is it going to be an installation in October that we get to physically experience and really make us think about the role of public space in the densest area? What can we do? So I don't know, that's just my reaction.
Can I say something? I'm not going to say defense or on behalf of the team. I just want to trace back a little how we start our internal meetings, that maybe kind of our experience can answer some of the concern that raised from you guys just before. Particular, why not physically see the things instead of the camera, okay? When we start, we didn't really talk about the device physically. We talk about how Hong Kong people living in their own way. Then they do research, they come back to me, and then we talk about that group of people, how they behave in the waterfront, and then this group of people in a very busy area, how they running around. Then we try to more objectively see how we physically live. So that's our first conversation. Then how we see things. So this is their question. By accident, really by accident, then I try to help them because they raise a question, how Hong Kong people see things and react things. Then I walk very close to my books. It's in my office anyway. In my bookshelf, I pull 2 books just by accident. Oh, by the way, this is a Hong Kong photographer. This is not really well known, but it's a very different one. Might as well you guys have a look how he sees Hong Kong then. That is David Shi Kwan. He's a very extremely famous fashion designer in the old days, but he personally has his own way to take photos. Then I just let them see, just one case, how Hong Kong people see his Hong Kong. Then they're very quiet and read the book by a very strange kind of a visual in front of them. They talk nothing and then just flip through the books very slow. But obviously, there's a very different eye to see Hong Kong in very micro way. I don't know why suddenly it's become micro topic in front of the table. Then they start to catch up. In fact, I can observe them. They realize, okay, not you guys, there's 3 of them. That's not the way I see Hong Kong. Don't take it for granted how your eyeballs see the actual things in front of you. Basically, Hong Kong people, particularly in the rush area they're working, they are not seeing surroundings. That's why they trigger them. There's a big impact, and then they allow themselves to think further. Any possibility, any contrast, or any things they can do among this kind of different experience. I think that's how they develop to this stage. And to me, I'm also a photographer. I know what's the difference is how you have a particular kind of motive to see things in different angle because I want to take a photo. That's why I see things from a viewfinder, but not necessarily in your daily practice. I think that is, I see the merit, I see the chemistry, if physically there that can trigger people's look at themselves in different manner. That's why I encourage them to keep going in this way. But as a physical space, as a pavilion in the modern Chinese way or not, that doesn't matter. To me, that is the visual experience that counts.
Maybe I jump to a very quick conclusion even before the session ends. Because I have some overall observation. I hope try to link to all the issues that I've been discussing. Yeah, I think one fundamental thing is actually it's already applied to the 3 groups already. We are talking about when we jump to the design element, we start to argue. So that's why I'm thinking about the way we should treat what's the end product. To me, it's not really just about really an obvious design solution. To me, it's more about seeing the topic from micro park to a bigger picture and see what we observe and see perhaps maybe I'll apply a few things. But actually, my suggestion is, to have a big impact at the end, the best thing is to do one installation, just one. Maybe we can vote which is the best, most dramatic event among all the 4 groups or within all the big and little ideas from the 4 groups, and then we just do one in October. But then at the same time, we are trying to analyze and explore all the little and big ideas during the way, because I think this is maybe more realistic and could have big impact. Take for example, in this group, I totally like the observation, the way you see how people behave, but I'm really not convinced about the end product. That's because the way is there's always many ways to do things, but when we jump to one very precise design solution in a very I said 3 times already today, in the most traditional sense, something not quite interesting happening. Because just now when you mentioned about the Chinese garden, I immediately thought of the other way. Maybe in a very busy Hong Kong area, if you talk about a traditional concept of a garden, somebody have mentioned about definition of a park already, that in the dictionary or the Hong Kong regulation that to have leisure, something like that. So how can we, in Hong Kong, we keep on complaining about we don't have enough open space or park, but actually a lot of Hong Kong people try to create their own garden mentally, or even mentally it's easy to understand, but physically it's also quite obvious. In a very busy in Central, I just choose a park that I can have my own peace of mind. Even if we're very busy, just because I don't know anybody there, for instance, or I'm already away from home, I feel very relaxed already. I don't mind seeing a lot of people. To me, physically, I feel very relaxed. I think this is also a bigger picture of Hong Kong, as we don't have homes are so small again. So a lot of people go out of their home to search for things that they could get things that's supposedly done at home. And then back to the example of the railing, is I also thought of another very important example for me, which is so widespread in Hong Kong. So many people dry their clothes in the city, and which is actually allowed by some authority. Like even in Tai Kung Shing, you are actually allowed a certain period of time to dry your mattress, or yeah, in springtime, I think. So this event actually tells you even more about the city. It's not about leisure park. It's more about you don't have space to dry your clothes. So that's why people dry the clothes in the park or outside, even in railings. So it's, to me, I think it's more meaningful. We just not talk about the topic of park, but what park lead to the other bigger picture, your life in the city, that means. And how is it possible? Already there's some ingenious solution or things already happening, so interesting, but also very meaningful at the same time. I don't know whether it's clear.
I think that actually what I would do is to definitely follow the chance, no? So I would follow and eliminate that panel from your design process, because clearly, no, there was like gravity decide for you. So I think that's good. Yeah, I don't know. I would like to like basically bring like the conversation to the beginning almost. Like there is also a question of why do we need to, when for example Eric was talking about like questions of security, questions of resolution of the Zoom. Actually, we are all under control, right? We already have that camera that is looking at us. So actually, I would like to actually rethink almost the beginning. It's like, do we really need like that space of deceleration? And those spaces already exist in the city, right? Like a spa is a space of deceleration, right? There's a space in which you enter and suddenly time starts to go slow. The temperature changes. There is like you are like connected to water. So I would really like come back to almost the beginning of certain decisions that you're taking here, and really understand what is exactly the purpose of that park that you're constructing, because it seems that it's a little bit something that already exists in the city. When we were looking at the image of In the Mood for Love, that space that was a cafe produced that space of deceleration, right? So I would rethink what is exactly that furniture that you're constructing. I would rethink what is exactly that curtain that you have, and what is specifically what is the purpose of that deceleration, because it feels like a little bit like something that we already have with our phones even. I don't know. I guess that I'm like a devil's advocate here, but I think that we have a romanticization of what slowness is that doesn't belong anymore to our lives. We are not used to stop. And why do we want to stop? That is a question that I would like conceptually would ask ourselves. No, I don't know. Maybe we want to like move to the next project. Do you? Yeah, it's fine. So maybe we slightly modify the circle. You open a little bit this direction. You open this direction, and we come. Okay, that's good.
Are we okay, Rolf, like this?
Yeah.
Yes?
Sorry, Rolf. We are like the hell.
We're filming, so we want to document this.
Okay.
Xavier. I mean, Tat, sorry.
Yeah. You know, I mean, I definitely want to come on this one, but I just want to add one thing about that one. You know, I actually forgot to say something about that one in the morning, but, you know, my understanding of that one is actually the most holistic and sophisticated impact generation project, because they're actually balancing the depth of impact, which means the people in the space, and then the people watching people in the space, which is the width of the impact. And I think that can be something really interesting, like, you know, maybe every day there's 10 people really influenced by staying in a room for 2 hours. But there will be 1,000 people looking at those people and actually generating some other things. I think, you know, I mean, that is something what I'm really interested in exploring, that one. Second point is about the privacy issue. I don't think that's a problem, because when you download an app, there's always a button to say, I allowed. I don't know what you're allowing for. When there's enough value that you exchange, privacy is not a deal. So, like, it's not an issue, it's not a big deal. So that means if you just basically afraid of, you know, people are going to afraid of being shoot, that means you're not generating enough impact. So not generating enough value to them. So just think about like, how we can maximize the value generated to them and people willing to do that performance. So anyway, so I want to move to this one. I think for this one, the biggest statement is that Park is anytime, anywhere, on demand, which is like a totally new type of, or just internet generation people always asking for. Like, I use my app to just get something anytime, anywhere. And the Park come to you. I mean, I think the idea is basically like using a very big internet mentalities to actually looking at public space. But what I would like to really push that or suggest that to go even further is the decentralization of the properties or the ownership. So basically, like, there's this project in China that you can basically own a piece of farmland for 2 weeks. And the vegetable grow from that farmland belongs to you, because, you know, if you're just, you know, growing, for example, like tong choy, it's like 2 weeks. You can grow that, right? So basically that's like, you know, a very, very small piece of time and space I can share. So I think, for example, like this one, maybe it's not like a truck that's shipping things to you, but it's actually really like, you know, have this kind of like really pushing the sharing, not just about the space, but also the time. Like, if there's a rooftop garden of somebody, can I own that garden for 5 minutes? How much should I pay for that? Right? I mean, I think there's like many, many ways that you can really push the extreme in terms of the internet mentalities for this entire project about public space. Because at the end of the day, public space become digital instead of, it's basically what people are talking about, like this offline and online thing. And the last point I want to give is really about like, what are we going to do for October? I think there is a need at this moment to shrink the scope into the minimum viable product. Writing an app in 3 months is impossible, no matter how much money they're going to put down. Okay, so all this experience is telling you.
We don't have money, by the way.
Exactly. So let's think about a way that
this is an ideas review.
We can simulate such process with a very, very small way, so that people understand the process of it, and we can actually even implement that, so that we can receive feedback and understand. Because at the end of the day, like all these kind of projects, there's no clients. It's not like a top-down project. It's a big client that I want this ABC, so let me provide a solution to you. The client is everybody. So let's create a channel to engage with our potential client first. So, for example, I think coming back to that rail ring project, maybe the MVP is to create a WeChat group. And in 3 months, if they can create 500 people in that group by just publishing their research and creating a crowd, so that you can actually start asking questions and feedback with them. Like all this design maybe like, you know, generated by them, or some of them, you know, proposed by all these other people. But eventually you can create a group. And based on that crowd, you can do whatever. You can give them a book. You can create a website. Doesn't matter. But prove to your funder in the future that I have a 500 people fans group, and I can do something about that. I think that's a big value that you can create. The same as this one, I think the same as that one, I think it's really about, you know, what can we do in 3 months' time with our limited time and energies and money, but to really pilot that so that we can get feedback from the potential client. Because right now we're talking about this. The designer is not the client. yet. Like all the things that what you want to do, but you don't really know what the market wants you to do. And it's not talking about one client in the market, talking about like 1,000 of that. So how can you really engage that? So basically that's my comment.
Thank you. Does anyone have constructive shaping and goal-driven outcomes? Doesn't have to be physical, but I think this is great just for the last kind of 10 minutes. And I actually would love the groups, I know you guys have been working incredibly hard on this project outside of your commitment in daily lives. But it'll be good for you all maybe to recap and let us know, like, what do you think your next steps are? I think that would be actually quite important after this really long day of discussions. I think that would be entirely useful for the teams. But a few more comments from the jury. Anyone else? Oh, Cole, yeah.
Yeah,
and yes, please.
So I guess I'd address this project a little bit in the morning and ask the group to maybe not rely so heavily on kind of stereotypical ideas of the park. And one suggestion that came up in the morning, which was kind of exciting, was thinking of these Taiwanese trucks, right, with events that are delivered and moved through towns. And that may be one way to think about the park, again, not as a space, but as a series of events. And if you were actually to go and study what happens in a park, and maybe your project becomes about the delivery of these events, of the events that might happen in the park, so that it's not merely about the physical space, but again about the activities that happen there. I didn't comment on this one, but the emphasis on seeing the city, I think, could be challenged a bit more, right? Because I also hear Hong Kong all the time. I smell Hong Kong all the time. And so I wonder if in your effort to rethink the park, which I applaud through the context of type, right, in a pavilion, maybe you could think about the smells, the sounds of a park. And you alluded to that in your presentation, right? Have you ever stopped to smell the roses? Imagine that this is a pavilion where the various blooming cycles of flowers in the parks of Hong Kong suddenly are kind of emitted within the pavilion, and you smell the rose, you smell the peony. It becomes a very personal experience that would completely get people to reconsider what the park experience is like through your pavilion. And then maybe a more general comment for all the groups, which seems to be coming up in the comments, is really taking a position on the physical and the digital. And I'm not going to take one position myself, but clearly there's a spectrum of opinions represented here, people who find the digital invasive versus people who find the digital empowering. And historically, right, going back centuries, it has been architecture that has mediated our relationship to each other, to landscape, to other buildings. And now, right, in literally the last 10 to 15 years, it's now our handheld devices that mediate our relationships to everybody. So that comes with some profound questions about architecture's role. And again, it's not necessarily positive or negative, but I think it would help all the projects if you took a position on that, particularly since each of you are incorporating digital elements into your quote-unquote physical projects. You seem to kind of take it for granted. You sort of throw it out there. Oh yeah, and there's going to be this app that does that. Or, oh yeah, and you're going to find stuff through online this way. And I think it's important to be a bit clearer and stronger on position-wise with that.
I think for a halfway mark, I mean, just focusing on this specific project, for a halfway mark, these illustrations, oh, is it the third way? Oh my, wow, okay. Well, just looking at these specific illustrations, it seems like very finite, but at the same time, it's potentially utopic for another idea. And back to what Colin was saying, and there doesn't seem to be any size like there's no minimum size that's been delineated to any of the groups as to how you define what is the size of a park, right? Some people, I find the delivery system very interesting, but the delivery system doesn't necessarily have to be vehicular. It could be people in your community. It could be, and also the size of a park, can I stay in my house and build a park in my balcony or on my windowsill? If you deliver that to me, so someone brought up farming, can I have it for 3 months to grow something and then I give it back? Or if I want to take a piece of this alleyway adjacent to my building and grow something, can you deliver that to me and let's create a small park? So that I think is less intrusive on, first of all, the investment it takes to buy a set of vehicles that are very specific and they have to be specifically built for certain things. And then you have to plug them in somewhere within the urban context. And we know Hong Kong is very difficult already as it is in terms of space. So, that photo I find interesting, yet quite difficult. It's like, why don't they just build a real park on that instead of putting it on top of 4 flatbed trucks? But at the same time, it may be waiting, maybe it could be a situation where it's waiting for construction to happen. And then so it's like 4 months of nothing. So so I can see that it could be defended. But at the same time, if we're talking about the concept of smallness, then I challenge this group of this design group to really think about how small can the park experience really be, and can I take it home with me?
Yeah, I've actually tried to rent plants before. I wanted to rent some moss and some lichen and some other small plants for the day, and it became impossible. You have to buy them. You have to own them yourself. And in a Hong Kong context, it's quite difficult to own plants because there's limited space. So actually, I like the idea that you can call someone up and get something delivered, and actually, better yet, you can give it back. Because even though you could afford the moss, I felt guilty killing the moss when we were done, because that made me feel worse, or putting it back into the park. I'll just sit. Maybe it's because I'm standing. But I like eye contact better. That's why I'm standing. But in this case, I like the mobile app, because in this case, then the app is asking or connecting pieces together. And I wonder if it can connect more than just the company together. It actually can connect expertise together, so that if someone knows a lot about farming, you can connect that way. Or the thing that you might be ordering is like the fertilizer. I agree with the truck network, because also the truck network seems to be going against the idea of, I like the idea of greening, because you're somehow trying to combat CO2 emissions and other environmental problems. I dislike the truck network because you're sort of employing these trucks to help you with that. So I wonder if there's other ways, like JJ was saying, there's other ways you can use this as a concept, and then be able to hand off like plants or moss from one person to the other. So it becomes more collective ownership for limited periods of time, for maybe potentially events. The other thing I was thinking about was that in this one, it's not just what is about, I have to stand up, sorry. It's looking at this Middle Ages all the way to now, and actually the thing that I would use to delineate between now and like very recent activities is actually what's happening in the parks. The fact that you don't experience Central Park like this so much. There's a lot of events. You can go to Central Park's website and look at the 500 events that are happening that year in the park as well. And I was thinking about how to connect with that, about being not about the greening, just about the greening, but what about other infrastructural needs that you might want to bring to your local park. So we have a sitting out area right there, and I would never go there because there's nothing happening there. Could this be something that starts to connect and allow you to make something happen there, communicate it among the community, bring the like-minded people there in order to inhabit something that's already, the space exists, to inhabit it in a different way, to make events happen, more or less. So it's more like pop-ups happen within existing parks, but make those existing parks more vital. Right now, all these sitting out areas aren't very vital because no one's there. Your friends aren't there, certainly. But can we make it something that becomes vital? And perhaps to make it vital, you can get the swimming pool. I appreciate that the swimming pool here is only this deep. But you can get that really shallow swimming pool into the park system, and then allow I'll pass the mic to you in a second, JJ. And then allow you to make something happen in the park that couldn't happen otherwise through this network as well.
One sentence. I just wanted, Eric, this brings back to your comment earlier that the way that people build parks in Hong Kong, it's cut and paste. It's very restrictive what's outside. So this can we could bypass the government or whoever approves the form of these parks, and where you can have a kit of parts that you could borrow and create your own utopic event.
But let me add one thing. I mean, I think that that comment actually makes me like review like the whole thing again, because I think that we have lost a little bit the perspective of what is a park, right? Like a park, it's not individual. A park is a space that, yes, has some kind of like, if you want, leisure connected to it, but it's fundamentally a social space, right? It's fundamentally a space in which friction, social friction, is produced. It's a space in which you cannot be alone. You have to negotiate your space with somebody else that you might know or maybe you might not know. So I think that actually I will come back to certain discussions that we had at the beginning about what is the public, right? To whom are you addressing the project, right? Who is going to be the audience? Who's going to be the society, the kind of society that is going to be using those spaces? So because that really, I think that attacks fundamentally processes like, for example, like what you were saying before, is like, can a park come to my house? No. Unless you bring somebody else with that, right? Because otherwise, it's not a park. Otherwise, it's basically a plant that you're going to have in your house. So I think that those modifications in terms of what it fundamentally produces like a status park, I think is an important question for everybody, not only for them. Because also, I would question again, like suddenly I come back to that project and say, well, actually, who is the public that is going to be sitting in that space? What is going to be the friction? Right? Because the public space is, by definition, a space of conflict, a space of negotiation with your neighbor, and a space in which you have to agree and negotiate at a certain point with your peers, whatever that means in a city. So I think that is for me like a fundamental question that has to do with society, has to do with the political position that you have when you are producing a space like that, and that I would put like as a general commentary to the rest of projects.
Quickly, I totally agree, as I mentioned earlier, that we should not define only micro park but also park, and there should be many different interpretations instead of just sticking to one. Yeah, either very conventional or new interpretation. I quickly have a gut reaction about I think we already know who are the experts in playing around with all this pop-up temporary open space or public park. We have the Filipinos. Maybe we can joint venture with them, yeah, and devise a set of toys for them to play 1 week. It's easily done in October.
I want to add one point because we hear enough advice and how to take next step on this mobile park. I think definitely, I think will benefit a lot of people, but it's just said who is targeting those people. How's the scale of it? I think the team may be too young for the example I want to cite as a reference for you. In the old Hong Kong in 1670s, there's a mobile library run by government. That kind of engagement needs and about social engagement, social needs at the same time. They don't have a lot of book or knowledge that we deliver a pop-up temporary library for those people they treasure. It's going to be benefit. Another similar thing is the mobile cinema. They just put a big white cloth to show movies for very local people. I think that is the two cases that you should learn from at that age, at that decade, that how they engage people, and then it can be applied how you take your park further.
Okay, Donald, last statement, and then I want to, if you don't mind, I would love to just get each group to just summarize Yeah, you'll get your chance to re-engineer your manifesto, and you don't need to answer what you're going to do for October today, because I think you need time to really absorb this intensity of conversation today. But just your feelings, your response, and maybe Donald, you have the kind of last statement, and then I think we'll bring it back to the teams. Yeah.
I mean, actually, just back to the questions that I posed this morning. It seems that a lot of the solutions is kind of withdraw from the public realm. We are creating our own paradise. We have created our own gated community because we have lost heart in changing the public realm in Hong Kong. And I think obviously that is one solution to give us own comfort. But I think it is important for us to think larger. We should have bigger dream. So that my question to the team is really how would you be able to bring the most impact to the community and the society, and not just create a paradise for yourself.
Okay. So how do we? I think from your point, how do you confront reality head on? And I think there's different ways of looking at that aspect. So I think that's also great. But are you comfortable, Carlos, with the re-manifesto? So, or the redefinition of smallness through the day, and also the manifesto of scale. If each team could just elect one representative to comment on your thinking, your process, both, I think, very optimistically and productively, how you want to take this further. And I'm really excited to take the next discussion offline over a drink and see how we can collectively support the teams. So maybe, since we're in front of Xavier, we'll work backwards.
Yep. Actually, when we were developing this idea, I think that it is totally unnecessary for today as a park delivery system, because we can always walk to a park nearby. But what if there's no such resources in the future? Like there are a lot of overpopulations, all the public space are being built into housing. So how can we do? Can the public own the autonomy to have their own park? So actually, we're like making a science fiction. All the delivery, the technology, the app is like the story or narrative of the science fiction. But every science fiction has a message to tell. Like Wall-E, even Wall-E, like Toy Story says something. What we want to tell is the public can actually change the public land to their own resources. Like I mentioned about the Freetown Christiania, which is actually quite important for our concept, because that is actually an experimental autonomy region in Copenhagen, where people can own their own the region. So for our park, actually everyone can crowdfund to own a part of share. Like even with some of our teams, we talked about the top up, bottom down. This is quite a main issue today, because maybe Hong Kong people, especially the young people, are not living very comfortably with a very top-down or sometimes a fake bottom-top policy system. So we are always trying to construct something that we can do to get back the resources. Yeah, it's kind of core message we try to
Okay, thank you. Thanks for your sharing. Wendy, I know I said one representative, but I'm always very open.
Okay, thanks. I want to respond. I really want to respond to what Carlos was talking about for the park, the definition of a park. I have think about this. If we change the park into something like this, will you still call it a park? When you create a micro park, is it a park? Is it a garden, or is it something else? Is it just a balcony? So I think Hong Kong in this very specific situation that because it's a very dense urban environment and you live in your towers, it's actually quite close to the natural parks here in Hong Kong. And if we are talking about the park in the future, in nowadays, in the contemporary park, we may rethink the definition of it. So the social interaction of people, it doesn't necessarily need to happen in a park. Yes, it happens in natural parks. It happens actually everywhere in the city. It can happen in a bar, in a restaurant, in all that, in a garden. But then what's the specific quality of the park? If we can just only take one unique feature of it, we extract it, then I think we didn't have chance to explain about the what we call the heteropia phenomenon. That's what you do in the Central Park compared to the city. The city and park. The city really is something you do every day. You work hard in your office. You have so much burden already in your life. Then the park comes in when you have the moment that you can totally relax. It's actually not being with other, not about social with others, but about being alone, being about empty.
And it's funny, actually reminds me,
nothing.
Wendy, when we first met you 4 months ago in March, I remember you saying the most important thing is having solace during your shower.
Yes, the shower moment.
The shower metaphor as a representation of the park for her. But interesting. Let's move on. We'll give other teams their kind of final voice. Thank you, Wendy. That's great. This is the most democratic team, I have to say. They always present together and very fair. So maybe there's no leader. Samuel. Okay.
I don't normally speak, but don't know why today. I think we all focus on the physicality of a park, but especially in our project or in this project as well, the park doesn't actually have a physical space. It doesn't really have to have a physical space. If you think about it, park could be exist in our mind, and it or why do you go to a park? You go to a park to relax, to kind of isolate yourself from the busy city you live in. So rather than having a physical park, our vision is actually to recreate this kind of mental isolations where you would actually trying to it's more emotional rather than physical. That's our visions. Rather than having a physical park, it's more like a park exists within our mind, trying to free oneself from the physicality of the cities.
Okay. Again, Stephen is always the. Stephen's still here. Hi, Stephen. Yeah. Okay.
So for the skip, and I think still to me the skip has its unique character and advantage maybe to be placed in the city as an element. And of course, thank you for all the great comments that we get, and I think it is just a framework. But what matters is the activities or events that can happen inside a space. So we have this thing, and we can put it in the city. But what can it impact the surrounding when it is put into a street, to create a ripple effect, and to understand the needs of the people in the community or the pedestrian within a specific condition, maybe. I'm thinking of just for example, there can be many types of skips. And for example, there are like 20 different designs of it, and they combine together, form a performance stage. Maybe all of them park in the West Kowloon big park, and in the weekend, and a lot of people go and gather there. But during the weekdays, when no one goes to West Kowloon, these skips can be transported into different districts and put into the streets, and having another impact. For example, maybe just a small toddler's playground outside a kindergarten, where the kindergarten is in a commercial building that they don't have a playground, so the kids can come out to play. Or maybe a small stage for some weekend music gathering at places where we saw many people playing music outside MTR stations, and this can provide a kind of a stage for them. And this kind of content for the skip is missing, and I guess that's the next step for our team to develop the exact content within this skip.
Okay, great. And I have a feeling, if I can just challenge you, just say if we can get some partners to support, where would you most want to see the skip? If you could choose one site in Hong Kong, where would it be? Outside your son's kindergarten? Where would it be?
Have to think about it.
No, don't think about it. Like, just tell me now.
Now?
If you had to choose, just and you had to make a decision today, what do you think would be the most impactful message for your skip?
I would like to put it at somewhere it is most needed, and I don't have a quick answer now.
Okay.
Yes.
So maybe the next step, you research those 20 most urgently needed prototypal sites, and then we can have a discussion with all the mentors and advisors.
Yes.
Great. Okay. Thank you. And then just to conclude the last group, Jose, are you sure you want to speak?
Yeah. This time will be
okay,
better.
Fion will be after you.
First, I think this will be a long-term project. Yeah, we will have a long way to go. I think the project the project will success based on its background, its policy, its when we launched this project and where we launched this project. The first thing I want to say is about the Darwin's negative. Playfulness is the nature of children, and many children like to use the railing as a playground because they are all around and very easy to get access. But it also leads to bad results, such as the fact that more than 600,000 children in the world are stuck by railing each year, or get hurt by climbing over railings. I always think, what kind of design can avoid these problems? So I hope we can get the answer in future studio. In addition, railing can also be a kind of carrier. In mainland China, many cities will have months to learn from Lei Feng. Lei Feng is a good guy in mainland China. Usually we learn from Lei Feng, the good guy, in April. Citizens and students will do good things. Do good things in the public, and we can see some enthusiastic parents, students, and will take the street we'll go to the street and clean the handrail, the railing, and clean these things, and make the street more beautiful and cleaner. So I think it will be a good timing to launch this project in mainland China and in some cities, and maybe we can cooperate with some mobile games like such like Pokemon Go. We can cooperate. We can we can try to work with this company and do something good. So, but we will try our best to make things happen. Because we believe everyone make a small change can make a big difference to the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Jose. Fionn, did you want to say anything, or are you okay? You completely agree with Jose.
Yeah, I'm okay. I think that just to remind myself that the first intention of choosing reeling as the topic or what we are going to work on is because I believe with this program maybe we can involve in building our everyday life environment and object that we should actually involve in. So not only within our flat, but yes, just everyone should have the desire to make the environment better.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for joining this collective marathon today. I would like to just thank everyone and take this grand opportunity to thank our critics. It is a Saturday, and to spend, I would say, a 10-hour session with us, it means a lot. And I'm so empowered by your contributions and your generosity to spend time with us today. So I just would like to really thank all of you, and also to have a community, and I think there's a lot of new faces and friends here. I really hope you can join our mission and vision to focus on how we can transform the future of our city through this program, and also your contributions are really important. Sorry to do this really bizarre thing. We are funded partially by the government through the Create Hong Kong, which has been very generous. So we have some questionnaires floating around. If you could kindly tick excellent, 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 this would guarantee our future for next year's Future Studio Extension program. And I wanted to thank Carlos, the incredible storefront art and architecture on this journey halfway, actually 2/3 of the way. We have an amazing event series tomorrow. So the Micro Park Group, who will be building on atmosphere, we are doing a walking series tomorrow morning, starting off right in, is it Sai Ying Pun? Oh my God, I don't have my newsprint. But we have the newsprints around. Please look at the meeting points. Carlos can share a little bit more. And then in the afternoon, we will be heading towards Salon 9. Please RSVP and register your name. It's one of those really liminal spaces that are borderline industrial, but also has the potential to actually bring in a lot of public. So please bring all your friends along. And just a last shout out to our incredible team again, Max from Storefront, Mavis and Jeannie, thank you, Laura. And if I've forgotten anyone else, AJ from Spring Workshop, and Phoebe, and our new project coordinators and friends, Calvin and Jeff, for continuing, and Ralph and your team. Thank you so much for supporting all of us. And please come enjoy some snacks and drinks, and we'll be concluding today. And I look forward to seeing the next steps. So thank you, everyone. Carlos, do you need to say anything? Oh, yeah, group photo and questionnaire.